Stop right there. This entrance is restricted.
I work here. I'm showing you my federal credentials now.
I don't care what card you're flashing. Back away from the door.
I'm a federal judge. My office is on the 4th floor.
4 security cameras were recording. High definition. Synchronized audio. No blind spots. And within 90 minutes, the footage from those cameras would be everywhere. By the end of this story, a 23-year-old rookie officer wouldn't just lose his job. He would trigger a multi-million-dollar settlement, force a complete overhaul of federal building security protocols, and become the reason an entire city rewrote how discrimination at checkpoints is handled. Stay with me, because the exact moment he realized the cameras caught everything was the exact moment his career ended. Before we break down what happens when ego collides with federal authority, comment where you're watching from. And if accountability matters to you, hit subscribe. We tell stories like this every week. Now rewind to 7:45 a.m. A quiet weekday morning. At the Monroe Street entrance of a federal building, federal employees were arriving for work. Security checkpoints were running exactly as designed. Badges were scanned. Doors unlocked. Elevators waited. Nothing unusual. Except for one woman approaching the entrance. She was dressed professionally, carrying a briefcase, holding a federal access badge that granted unrestricted entry to the building. She had walked through those doors thousands of times over the past 11 years. What the officer standing at that checkpoint didn't know or refused to believe was that the woman he was about to stop wasn't a visitor. She wasn't lost. She wasn't unauthorized. She was a United States District Court judge. And the next 19 minutes, captured from 4 angles, would expose how quickly a routine morning turns into an unlawful detention when assumptions replace credentials. The building itself was designed for authority. 3 federal courtrooms, chambers for 7 district judges, U.S. attorney offices, administrative staff supporting the entire judicial district, every entrance, every corridor. Every door was governed by protocol, not instinct, not guesswork, not personal opinion. And the woman standing outside that morning was not unfamiliar with those protocols. Judge Angela Morrison had worked in this building for 11 years. She was appointed to the federal bench after 15 years as a federal prosecutor, confirmed by the Senate, entrusted with cases involving constitutional rights, civil liberties, and federal criminal law. This wasn't just her workplace. It was where she enforced the law. On the morning of January 12th, she arrived earlier than usual. 8:30 a.m. Pre-trial conference waited on her calendar. She approached the Monroe Street entrance calmly, as she always had. Professional attire, briefcase in hand, her federal judicial identification and electronic access badge ready. According to access logs later reviewed during the investigation, her credentials were current, active, and unrestricted. Her photograph was in the system. Her biometric data was stored. Her badge was authorized to unlock every secure door in the building. For judges and staff, entry was typically seamless. Scan the badge. Hear the verification chime. The door unlocks. That's how the system was designed to work. But systems fail when individuals decide they know better. And standing between Judge Morrison and that scanner was an officer who had been on that post for less than a week. Officer Ryan Caldwell had been assigned to the Monroe Street checkpoint for 6 days. 23 years old. 8 months out of the academy. Employed by a private security contractor hired to staff federal building entrances. On paper, he was there to follow protocol, verify credentials, use the scanner system, and defer to supervisors when questions arose. But Caldwell didn't trust the system. His personnel file, reviewed after the incident, would later reveal troubling details. Minimal training on federal employee credentials. No instruction on judicial identification. And a note from his field supervisor that would suddenly make sense. Overly aggressive. Challenges individuals he perceives as non-compliant. At Shapta Patruzech Shichinch A. M. Security camera 3 recorded Judge Morrison approaching the scanner. Her badge was already in her hand. Before she could scan it, Caldwell stepped laterally, positioning his body directly between her and the entrance. Not to assist. Not to verify. To block. He raised his hand in a stopping gesture. Stop right there. The words weren't a greeting. They were a command. The audio system captured everything. This entrance is restricted. Judge Morrison paused. Surprised but composed. She had heard this tone before in cases where authority was exercised without justification. "Good morning, officer," she said calmly. "I'm Judge Angela Morrison. I work in this building." She raised her federal judicial identification and her access badge, holding them clearly in view. What happened next would turn a routine credential check into the beginning of an unlawful detention. Judge Morrison held her credentials steady, directly in front of him. Federal judicial identification. Active access badge. Her photograph clearly visible. Caldwell glanced at them, not closely. Not carefully for no more than 2 seconds. Then he shook his head. "I don't recognize that ID format." He gestured toward the street. "You need to use the visitor entrance on 3rd. It was a statement, not a suggestion. Judge Morrison remained calm. Though the situation was becoming increasingly concerning. "Officer, this is standard federal judicial identification," she explained. "It's registered in your security database. If you scan my badge, the system will verify my access immediately." That was the procedure. Scan, verify, resolve. But Caldwell didn't move toward the scanner. Instead, he crossed his arms. "I'm not scanning anything until I verify you're supposed to be here." Then came the order. Step back from the entrance. In that moment, the exchange shifted. This was no longer about credential verification. It was about control. Judge Morrison understood exactly what was happening. She had presided over cases where officers substituted personal judgment for established protocol and violated rights in the process. "Officer," she said evenly, calmly, but firmly. "I am a federal employee with valid credentials attempting to enter my workplace. I am requesting that you verify my identity through building security." Caldwell's posture changed. He wasn't cautious anymore. He was confrontational. And the cameras kept recording. As Judge Morrison remained standing at the entrance, still blocked from the scanner. Another federal employee approached from behind her. A white man in his 50s, dark suit, briefcase in hand. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. He simply raised his badge. Caldwell reacted instantly. He stepped aside. The man scanned his badge. The verification chime sounded. The door unlocked. No questions. No hesitation. No resistance. The cameras captured the moment perfectly. Same entrance. Same checkpoint. Same badge system. 2 federal employees arriving for work. Only one was stopped. Judge Morrison noticed it immediately. But she didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She stayed focused on procedure. "Officer Caldwell," she said, reading his name from the badge on his uniform. "I'm asking you to contact building security through your radio and verify my credentials." She stated her name clearly. Angela Morrison, United States District Court, Courtroom 4B. She added one final detail. "I have a pre-trial conference in less than 40 minutes. Caldwell's jaw tightened. I don't take instructions from people trying to talk their way into secure facilities. Then he escalated. If you don't step away from this entrance, I'll have you removed from federal property. That threat captured on camera, recorded with audio, marked the moment this interaction crossed from improper conduct into an unlawful detention, and the cameras never stopped rolling. Judge Morrison did not step back. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue emotionally. She did what federal judges are trained to do. When authority is abused, she stated the law. Officer Caldwell, she said calmly, I am a federal employee with valid judicial credentials. I am lawfully attempting to enter my workplace. She gestured toward the scanner only inches away. Your refusal to verify my credentials through the badge system is a violation of established access protocol. Caldwell moved closer, not to hear her better, not to resolve the issue, to intimidate. The cameras recorded him stepping into her personal space, forcing her to tilt her head slightly upward to maintain eye contact. I'm in charge of this checkpoint, he said, and I say you're not getting in. Judge Morrison recognized the shift immediately. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an assertion of unchecked power. I am formally requesting, she said carefully, that you contact building security or your supervisor to verify my identity. She paused, then added the words that would later appear verbatim in federal filings. If you refuse, you are obstructing a federal officer in the performance of her duties. Caldwell scoffed. You can request whatever you want. Judge Morrison lifted her judicial identification again, this time angling it deliberately toward the nearest security camera. This is proper federal identification, she said. Your refusal to verify it is creating an unlawful obstruction. Behind the reinforced glass doors, movement began to slow. People inside the building had noticed, and someone was about to step forward. Behind the reinforced glass doors, someone had been watching. Maria Chen, a law clerk assigned to Judge Morrison, had been walking toward the exit when she noticed the standoff, the blocked entrance, the officer standing too close, the judge unable to move forward. She recognized Judge Morrison immediately. Something was wrong. Maria pushed the door open from inside and addressed the officer directly. Officer, she said, steady but urgent. That's Judge Morrison. She works here. I'm her law clerk. She held up her own building badge. I can verify her identity if there's confusion. Caldwell turned sharply, irritation flashing across his face. Ma'am? Return to the building, he snapped. This doesn't concern you. But Maria didn't retreat. She's a federal judge. Maria said, if you contact building security, they'll confirm that immediately. Instead of using the radio, instead of scanning the badge, instead of resolving the situation the way protocol required, Caldwell doubled down. I said, step back inside. He ordered. You're interfering with security operations. That refusal to accept verification from a second federal employee was captured clearly on camera. And it wouldn't be the last time, because just seconds later, another figure approached the entrance. Judge Thomas Bradford, 23 years on the federal bench. He scanned his badge without issue. The door unlocked immediately. But instead of walking inside, he stopped. He looked at Judge Morrison still standing outside. Angela, he asked, concern unmistakable. What's going on? For the first time, this wasn't just one judge against one officer. Now, the balance of authority had shifted, and Officer Caldwell didn't realize yet that he was about to make the worst decision of his career. Judge Bradford stepped closer to the checkpoint. Angela, he said calmly. "Is there a problem?" Judge Morrison turned toward him, relief briefly crossing her face. "Tom," she replied. "Officer Caldwell is refusing to allow me to enter the building. He will not verify my credentials." Judge Bradford's expression hardened instantly. He turned to Caldwell with the tone he reserved for contemptuous behavior in his courtroom. "Officer, Judge Morrison is a federal judge. I can personally verify her identity. Allow her to enter immediately or contact your supervisor." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Sir," he said, "I don't care who vouches for her." Judge Bradford paused, then reached for his phone. "Then I'm calling the U.S. SOF, Marshal's office." That was the moment Caldwell snapped. Frustrated, cornered, challenged in front of witnesses, he stepped back slightly and delivered the line that would define his career clearly, loudly, and on camera. "I don't care how many people in suits show up," he said. "People like her don't work in federal buildings unless they're cleaning them." The air went still. Camera 1 captured Caldwell's face as he spoke. Camera 2 captured Judge Morrison freezing in disbelief. Camera 3 caught Judge Bradford's expression shift from irritation to outrage. Camera 4 captured Maria Chen raising her phone. Judge Morrison spoke with controlled precision. "Officer Caldwell," she said evenly, "that statement is discriminatory. It is offensive, and it has been recorded by multiple federal security cameras." She paused. "You have now moved from improper credential verification to an actionable civil rights violation." Caldwell had crossed a line, and there was no way back. Judge Bradford didn't argue. He didn't lecture. He simply pulled out his phone. "Then I'm calling the U.S. Pre-Tin, Marshal's office," he said. He placed the call on speaker. "This is Judge Thomas Bradford at the Monroe Street entrance. A security officer is refusing to allow Judge Angela Morrison to enter the building despite valid federal credentials. The officer has made discriminatory statements. I need a supervisor here immediately." The response was instant. "Judge Bradford. This is Deputy Marshal Williams. We're dispatching now. ETA 2 minutes. Is Judge Morrison safe?" "She's safe," Bradford replied, eyes still locked on Caldwell. "But she is being unlawfully denied access by Officer Ryan Caldwell." For the first time, Caldwell's confidence wavered. He shifted his weight, looked toward the cameras, then back at the judges. 90 seconds later, the interior doors opened. 2 in 1 S-Pod. Marshals stepped out, followed closely by the building's security director. Donald Pierce, a veteran of federal courthouse security with nearly 2 decades of experience. Pierce took one look at the scene. Judge Morrison outside. 2 judges present. A visibly agitated rookie officer at the checkpoint. He didn't need an explanation. "Judge Morrison," Pierce said immediately, "I am deeply sorry. Please come inside." Then he turned to Caldwell. "Officer, step away from the checkpoint. You are relieved of duty pending investigation." Caldwell's face went pale. "Sir, I was just following protocol." "No." Pierce cut him off. "You refused to verify federal judicial credentials. You ignored verification from court staff and another federal judge. And you made a statement that will now be reviewed by multiple agencies." He gestured toward the side of the entrance. "You're done here. Leave the checkpoint now." As one marshal escorted Caldwell away, the other walked with Judge Morrison into the building. Behind them, the cameras kept recording, and inside the security office, a different kind of process had already begun. As Judge Morrison was escorted inside, the tone of the building changed. This was no longer a misunderstanding to be smoothed over. It was a recorded incident. Inside the security office, Director Pierce immediately issued a radio command. Preserve all footage from the Monroe Street entrance. Pull the last 30 minutes from every camera. Archive under Federal Records Protocol. 4 cameras. Multiple angles. Synchronized audio. Nothing would be overwritten. Nothing would disappear. By the time Judge Morrison reached her chambers, the footage was already being copied to secure federal servers and flagged for legal review. Her law clerk, Maria Chen, followed closely behind. Notebook already open. Judge, she said quietly. I recorded part of the interaction on my phone as well, and I know the building cameras captured everything. Judge Morrison nodded. Document everything you saw and heard. She replied. Include timestamps if possible. Within the hour, Director Pierce arrived at her chambers with a formal incident report and a sealed flash drive. Judge Morrison, he said carefully, I've reviewed the footage. Officer Caldwell's conduct is indefensible. He hesitated before continuing. His refusal to verify your credentials violated protocol. His statement will trigger mandatory reporting to federal civil rights authorities. Judge Morrison asked one question. Has he had prior complaints? Pierce's expression darkened. 2 informal complaints in 6 days. Both from employees of color. Neither was escalated. In that moment, this stopped being about one officer. It became evidence of a system that failed to act until the cameras made denial impossible. By the end of that day, the incident had already moved beyond the walls of the courthouse. Judge Bradford submitted a sworn witness statement describing the encounter in detail, including the contrast between how he was allowed entry and how Judge Morrison was blocked. Maria Chen filed a 3-page declaration with precise timestamps and verbatim quotes. The U.D.S. Marshal Service opened a formal protective investigation. Standard protocol when a federal judge reports a security incident involving potential civil rights violations. Within 48 hours, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was notified. So was the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. And then, the lawsuit was filed. A comprehensive federal civil rights complaint naming Officer Ryan Caldwell, the private security contractor, and the Building Management Authority. 43 pages. Security footage attached as exhibits. Audio transcripts. Multiple judges as witnesses. The case appeared on PACER, the Federal Court Record System. A legal news outlet picked it up almost immediately. Their headline spread fast. Federal judge blocked from courthouse by security officer who said people like her clean buildings. This is way 200. The article embedded the video clips. And once people saw the footage, there was no debate. Social media erupted. Legal scholars weighed in. Civil rights organizations issued statements. Sentinel Protection Services released a short response. We are aware of the incident. The officer has been terminated. We are cooperating fully. But the damage was already done. Because this wasn't just one officer anymore. It was a system on trial. Behind closed doors. The reality became unavoidable. The security company's legal team reviewed the footage frame by frame. 4 angles. Clear audio. Multiple witnesses, including 2 federal judges. Their insurance carrier issued a blunt assessment. This case is indefensible. The discriminatory statement was explicit. The contrast in treatment was undeniable. And the plaintiff wasn't just credible, she was a federal judge with first-hand knowledge of civil rights law. Settlement negotiations began 6 weeks later. Judge Morrison's demand wasn't driven by vengeance. It was driven by reform. The final settlement totaled $9 million, but the money wasn't the headline. What mattered were the changes. mandatory training on federal credentials for all security officers, anti-discrimination education with testing requirements, audio and video recording at every federal checkpoint, automatic review of any complaint involving access denial, immediate reassignment of officers with pattern complaints, quarterly transparency reports to federal oversight bodies. Sentinel Protection Services agreed to implement every reform across more than 200 federal facilities nationwide. Officer Ryan Caldwell's termination was permanent. He was barred from working any federal security contract for 5 years. His career ended at 23 not because of one mistake, but because bias met documentation. Judge Morrison returned to the bench quietly. In a later opinion, she wrote, "Discrimination thrives in the gap between policy and practice. The remedy is not silence, but systems that make bias visible, costly, and unacceptable." Her case became required reading in law schools. A training example for security firms. A warning embedded in federal policy. The cameras installed to protect the building ended up protecting dignity. They didn't just capture misconduct. They forced accountability. This is what happens when assumptions collide with credentials. When ego meets evidence. When power is checked by documentation, bias doesn't survive scrutiny. And in a world where cameras never blink, discrimination doesn't hide. It multiplies until accountability becomes unavoidable. And this time, it didn't just cost one officer his badge. It bought systemic reform that will protect federal employees for generations.